to speak with us today is Diana Moss from the American Antitrust Institute. We're very happy to have her on. I've really appreciated our conversation that we've had over the last couple of years. And I know Fred really appreciates her as well, Fred Stokes. We've had multiple conversations that I was able to be a part of that. I'm sure many of you had spoken with Diana as well. In fact, I know that she's presented to OCM here in the past, and we're happy to have her. She wasn't able to be here in person, but she was able to at least join us virtually. So we're thankful for that. So without further ado, Diana, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks very much, Mike. Can you hear me? All good on sound?
We're good.
Okay. Okay, wonderful. Well, hello, everybody. And I'm sorry not to be there in person. I'm coming to you from Boulder, Colorado. And it's a real honor and a pleasure to be here today and speak on these really important competition issues. As you might know, AAI is the leading progressive competition research, education, and advocacy organization. We've been around for almost 25 years, advocating and agitating for strong antitrust enforcement, but also, and I mean all enforcement, state, federal, private enforcement, but also coherent competition policy. The two go hand in hand. We've been involved in food and agriculture, I think, for as long as our organization has been around, and we have had numerous long-term collaborations with other advocacy groups like OCM, National Farmers Union. I know Rob LaRue is there, Food and Water Watch. We've worked with RCAF. I've had conversations with USCA and others. And so we are a very broad-based competition advocacy organization, but our line of advocacy in food and agriculture is one of our longest and strongest, and we will continue to do that. So I don't want to take a whole bunch of time. I want to spend about 15 minutes on some really important concepts and developments. I'm going to do that through just about 12 slides, which we'll zip through, and then I would love to take questions. I know there's a panel after this, and then standing between you and the cocktail hour, so I'm gonna power through here. And I really want to start by drawing your attention to this really scary graphic, which is called concentration in the food supply chain. And you'll notice that this looks like a bottleneck. And that's exactly what it is. We call this market power bottlenecks. And so what we have up top, obviously, are producers, and producers purchase inputs, fertilizer, technology, all sorts of other things, so that you can grow and you can raise animals and harvest. We see consumers at the bottom, lots of eaters, and lots of producers. So those are the big bubbles at the top and the bottom of the supply chain. Pretty much everything in the middle is highly concentrated, and that is the direct result of massive consolidation and very weak antitrust enforcement over the last 40 years. Concentration in trading, marketing, risk management, certainly high concentration in processing, beef processing, poultry processing, high concentration in food manufacturing, and also in wholesale distribution and food service, and certainly in retail grocery. You all know this, perhaps better than I do, but we have seen massive sweeping consolidation and rising concentration in the supply chain. So a bottleneck supply chain is bad news for producers and for consumers, and for society, and for the stability and the security of the supply chain. And we'll get into these issues, but this is the picture we're dealing with right now. And this is why AAI spends so much time advocating for more vigorous enforcement of merger law, of monopolization law, and of laws that prohibit anti-competitive agreements through things like cartel behavior, price fixing, market allocation, and the like. So let's move on, just to give you a snippet of how bad this problem is. Let's look at 4 firm ratios in key segments of the supply chain, right? This is pretty current data. based on 2018, 2019 US sales in the United States. Meat processing, that's all meat, all proteins, 75% of the market is controlled by 4 firms. In agrochemicals, 65% of the market is controlled by 4 firms. In agricultural commodity trading, 80% of the market controlled by 4 firms. And retail grocery coming up fast, increasing rapidly, 60% of the market controlled by 4 firms. When we see these tight oligopolies of just a few firms in markets, any sector, we worry a lot about the loss of incentives to compete and rather to collaborate or to collude to fix prices, to maximize the profits of the cartel or the oligopoly, to obviously limit output, to reduce quality and to reduce innovation. These are all bad things for consumers, and they're all bad things for producers. They're also bad for smaller entrants, innovative entrants that want to break in to a supply chain to operate at particular levels. So for example, firms wanting to innovate in microprocessing, protein microprocessing, or bringing in new food manufacturing types of technologies. So it's not a good scene. I won't say that again. It's pretty clear. Here are the biggest oligopolies that we see in food and ag. Obviously, meat processing, 75%, we just said, Tyson, JBS, Cargill, Smithfield. That's even higher just in beef, right? That percentage is even higher in beef, 85%. In agrochemicals, we've got Bayer, Corteva, BASF, German firm, and ChemChina, right? In commodity trading, we have Kofco, Archer Daniels, Midland, and Bunge. Retail grocery is Walmart, the Schwartz Group, Kroger, and Aldi. And then, of course, in fertilizer, talk to Bob Taylor, who I know is either on the call or in the room, which is a recognized global cartel. So, you know, the punchline here is cartels and tight oligopolies control virtually every aspect of the food supply chain. And producers are the direct victims of cartelistic behavior by depressing prices that you all receive for your commodities and jacking up your input costs for agricultural biotech, for fertilizer, for machinery. And consumers are the victims as well by paying higher prices and getting lower quality. So AAI's had our eye on this serious situation for a long time. I'm not going to go into beef. I'm just flipping this slide up briefly. You've heard about beef from Peter, who obviously is the most expert in this area. 4 firms controlling 85% of steer and heifer. In ag biotech, which not as many people keep track of, certainly if you're a grower and you're raising row crops, then you'll know this, but you know, we've gone from the big 4 to the big 6 to the big 4. We lost that much competition in 2 years with the mergers of Bayer Monsanto and Dow DuPont and Syngenta ChemChina, right? 2 years, we went from the big 6 to the big 4. So Bayer Monsanto is a monopoly, otherwise known as a dominant firm in canola, 95% in canola traits, right? For traded seed, GMO seed. In soybean traits, 72% market share, and in cotton seed, 73% market share. So as we know, Monsanto is a very powerful actor. Monsanto, Bayer, Dow DuPont, Syngenta together have an oligopoly in corn traits. So just these few firms control all the ag biotech that goes into producing traded seed, whether you call it traded seed, transgenic seed, GMO seed, right? And so that means that farmers are going to pay incredibly high costs, technology costs for traded seed, and they will have very few choices. Let's move on. Manufacturing and grocery, control of distribution. There has been a recent growth in grocery concentration due to consolidation. You know, we saw Safeway Albertsons go down, the Delhaize Ahold transactions go down. The FTC is very fond of approving grocery mergers, and instead of going to federal court to block them, to take remedies, right? They'll require divestitures in certain geographic areas. And so the Federal Trade Commission is the antitrust agency that handles all grocery mergers. We're starting to see failures in those remedies. In Safeway Albertsons, for example, Northwest grocer Hagen bought the assets that the FTC required the parties to divest as a requirement of their merger. Hagen was unable to maintain those stores, shuttered those stores within 10 months, and they were all sold back to Safeway Albertsons. So that was a failed remedy for a highly concentrative, harmful merger. In retail grocery, we see brand proliferation in stores. You know, consumers walk into a store and they see shelves stocked with hundreds of brands, which, oh, by the way, are controlled only by a small handful of firms. So it gives this illusion of competition when there is no competition. And obviously, the whole problem of sharing of marketing costs in the store, slotting fees to get products on shelves, the role of category captains, this all promotes lack of competition and potential exclusion of certain actors and players in the retail industry, and that constrains competition as well. We're very concerned at AAI about the foreclosure of the independent grocer. We've done work with NGA and will continue to do that, I hope. But we are losing our independent grocers, and it is getting harder and harder for them to compete because they cannot get access to the types of bulk discounts and other types of requirements, restrictive practices that are placed on them. So again, just a few key examples of the competition problem in retail grocery. I would keep your eye on digital farming, right? Digital farming is now going to be the fourth level in a vertically integrated supply chain, right? If you look at growing, you've got traits, you've got seeds, you've got agrochemicals, and now you have digital farming. Monsanto and others went in early on and bought up these small digital farming startups to, you know, pretty much take them out and neutralize them because they were potentially competitive threats. But we now see these integrated digital farming systems, which the companies are selling as integrated solutions for growers, right? And what essentially what they're doing is they're capturing and appropriating farmer data through technology agreements. Growers may not even know that they don't own or control their data anymore. And that data is being used to create these closed cropping systems that lock growers into a single system. And that gives them very little choice in terms of which cropping systems they're going to use. And certainly if you know Roger Johnson, Rob LaRue's predecessor at NFU, who was a canola farmer, I think up in the Dakotas, you know, Roger would say, I only had two choices for growing canola. And with all of these integrated cropping systems now, with the advent of digital farming, that problem has gotten even bigger and places more restrictions on growers. All right, so those are just a few horror stories of what's going on in various sectors. What are the consequences of all this concentration and lack of antitrust enforcement and market power bottlenecks? What are the consequences? Well, they're serious. They're absolutely serious. They hit producers really hard who are squeezed through higher input costs and lower commodity prices that are paid to you for your commodities because you are selling into a buyer's cartel. You are selling your fed cattle to a cartel of packers, or you are selling your processed products into a very small number of powerful retail grocers. So it all has the effect of depressing the prices that are paid to producers who are squeezed on the top end by high input costs because there's no competition or very limited competition up there. It's a squeeze, and there is no way out of that box for producers. So what's happening? Well, we're losing our family farms, you know it. We've lost local economic development. That is a very important byproduct of farming and growing. I grew up in the West. I didn't grow up on a farm, but I grew up near ranches in New Mexico, and I've lived in Colorado for a lot of my life. And you can see it happening. You can see these small rural communities deteriorating and disappearing, and you can see growers having to pick up second jobs just to be able to support their families. And more generally, this threatens our food supply, and it threatens our food security. We saw this with the pandemic. We saw the breakdown in the beef supply chain. We saw the shortages. We saw the shutting down of packing plants, ostensibly because of the pandemic. If there had been more competition in beef processing, we probably would not have seen the depth of the damage that resulted and the high prices that resulted from the effect of the pandemic on destabilizing the beef supply chain. And we're seeing it in other sectors as well. We're seeing it in healthcare, we're seeing it in shipping, right? Transportation bottlenecks, all this, all very similar effects. Okay, so what happens to consumers? Well, they pay higher prices from a lack of competition. These processors and grocery stores and manufacturers who sit in the middle of these supply chains, right? They bid down the prices that they pay to you, and then they jack up the prices that they charge the consumer. So the consumer is also squeezed. How are they squeezed? Well, we got a lot of people on limited incomes, and inflation is high, right? And we have economic disruption still from the pandemic. And so consumers get the squeeze by having to allocate limited budgets and incomes to paying higher food costs and getting lower quality and getting less innovation. And so the whole picture here from a 10,000 foot level is that we have food supply chains in the United States that have become excessively fragile because of these market power bottlenecks and a lack of competition. They lack resiliency. So if there's a shock, whether it's a pandemic or weather or political events, these supply chains aren't going to survive those shocks. They're gonna shake, and they're potentially gonna fall apart. And we came very close to that during the pandemic with the beef crisis. All right, moving on. Let's turn very quickly to merger enforcement. Part of the picture behind weak merger enforcement in the United States, which goes back 40 years, is really driven in part by huge swings in enforcement vigor from administration to administration. And you can see that right here, right? So what I've put on this graph, very simple, are two really important metrics. One is the rate at which the agencies are issuing additional requests for information on deals, mergers that are reportable to the government. So, not all mergers, even if they're reportable, get a closer look. In fact, 80% of them don't, right? They get something called early termination, but 20% of mergers that are reportable do get a harder look. And that's called a second request for information. That's where the government goes out and starts collecting information on markets and market shares and competitors and sales volumes and where do you sell and all of this stuff. So that's the second request rate. The challenge rate is the percentage of mergers that the government actually files a lawsuit to challenge. And they can go to court and block it, or they can say, okay, you can fix this if you offer up some remedies. So what we see from the Clinton administration to the Bush administration, so Democrat to Republican administration, is a huge fall off in enforcement vigor. You can see that. And from the Bush administration to the Obama administration, we see an uptick in enforcement vigor, right? And then from Obama to Trump, again, another swing from Democrat to Republican, we see a slight fall off in enforcement vigor. So we are waiting and watching, and we're seeing indications that the Biden administration is engaging in more vigorous enforcement. We're very anxious to see the rubber meet the road on the messaging coming out from the DOJ and the FTC on really being more aggressive. All right, finally, here's the problem with weak enforcement. It's amazing that you can sum this up in one graph. I took the rate of second requests, which I just described, These are the requests for additional information, the percentage of mergers where the agencies say, you know, we're going to look harder at this. And I graphed it. I put it on a graph from 1998 to 2020. What you see is this enormous downswing, you know, downslope from 1998 to about 2015. The agencies were not issuing the same percentage of second requests year after year after year. This meant that enforcement was becoming more lax. The agencies were not taking the close look at the deals and issuing, as a result of issuing second requests. But we have seen since about 2016, an upswing in the rate of second requests. That means the agencies are issuing these additional requests for information and they are taking the closer look. We want to see that rate continue to go up. And we want to see it not only continue to go up, but to stabilize as we move forward. So this big dip in the rate of second requests is really encapsulates the decades-long laxness in enforcement that we've seen in the food and ag sector. Okay, so just to sum up, key takeaways: weak enforcement has absolutely caused concentration problems and market power bottlenecks, 100%. The agencies are taking more remedies in harmful mergers than they are moving to block. The agencies should be going to federal court more to get an injunction to stop a harmful merger instead of taking remedies like the divestitures they took in Safeway Albertsons that did not work. And that's happened in other sectors too, in rental cars and insurance, health insurance, and other areas. Right now, the under enforcement of domestic cartels, for example, the packers, is really hurting producers, consumers, and small businesses. I'm not involved in that. I know others in that room have been involved in talking to the DOJ about an investigation into the packer cartel, but a lack of, for whatever reason, a lack of enforcement against domestic cartels is really taking a toll on producers and consumers and small businesses who are victims of anti-competitive, harmful conduct. What are the priorities moving forward? Hang on one sec, everybody. I have a slight problem here with my video. Just hang on one sec.
While we're waiting for Diana, just a reminder, if you open up your brochure or your folder, you'll see a yellow sheet. We value these very highly. We'd love to know your opinion of the day, things that we can work upon, things that you appreciate. There's a box in the back that says survey, recycle badges here. That's where you put your badges. That's where you put the yellow sheet. So thank you very much for doing that. Do we have Diana back?
I'm back. I'm very sorry. I had an unstable internet connection there for just a sec. I apologize. Okay, so where were we? What are the priorities moving forward for AAI and others? We are advocating strongly for more private price fixing cases and more coordination between state, federal, and private enforcers. That's a very important partnership that works well and can work even better. We're also advocating and working with USDA to create more coordination across government. This is the essence of President Biden's executive order, where USDA is taking really bold, aggressive steps to through proposed rulemakings, through initiatives, to bolster and support and create a runway, right, for a stronger, more coherent competition policy that will help and bootstrap antitrust enforcement. We're also very much in support and working with groups to essentially create workarounds to these established supply chains where we see entrenched market power, through things like creation of an independent meat processing channel, right? Microprocessors, independent ranchers working together to create a workaround supply chain that consumers can avail themselves of because they're going to get high quality, raised in the U.S. beef, and they can vote with their dollars. And consumers want to vote with their dollars when it comes to food because they care about quality and they care about innovation. And we're certainly involved in country of origin labeling. All right, just to finish up, what are we doing at AAI in terms of our research, our education, and our advocacy? Well, for years now, we've put on workshops and conferences on all types of enforcement and competition policy. We focus really strongly on getting market participants, folks like you in the industry, feet on the ground, in the markets, dealing with the packers, dealing with distribution channels. We want those people at our industry conferences. That's how we learn, and that's how we can best advocate. We've written hundreds of letters to USDA and to DOJ and to FTC urging stronger enforcement. We have taken hard positions opposing mergers in agricultural biotechnology and packing and other areas. We spent a lot of time with the media, educating the media on mergers, monopolization, and criminal cartel activity. It's very important that the media understand how the antitrust laws work and the importance of competition policy. We are very much increasing awareness, and we have pioneered this topic, which is smaller market participants fear retaliation from large, powerful players if they talk to the feds, or if they talk to advocacy groups, or they make it clear that they are the victims of a potential antitrust violation. So if you don't have people willing to step forward to tell the government their stories about anti-competitive conduct and the harmful effects of mergers, then we won't have any antitrust enforcement in this country. Antitrust enforcement relies on market participants to step forward to tell their stories about how they have potentially been harmed. But companies have gotten so big that the problem of fear and retaliation now has reached epic proportions. And so we are spending a lot of our time addressing that issue. And then finally, a lot of collaboration with other advocacy groups. Full circle back to my initial comment, our work with OCM, with NFU, with other groups. This is an industry where collaborations and speaking with one voice and putting the power of multiple groups together to send messages to Congress, to state legislators, to state antitrust enforcers, to federal antitrust enforcers. That's really the only way it's going to work, because there are, thousands, hundreds of thousands of small producers who speak with very important but small voices. We've got to get that voice amplified through collaborative work with other organizations. And Mike, I will leave it at that if there are any questions.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. In one of your early slides, you've got commodity trading, 80% refer. What does commodity trading mean? What's in that?
So that's a good question, and not, commodity trading and risk management tends to fly under the radar screen. So this is mostly for crops, where farmers or growers, they have to hedge their risks in terms of weather events and price volatility. You know how volatile commodity markets can be, right? They can be impacted by any number of factors. And so operations that want to create some price stability and predictability will engage services of commodity traders, right? And risk management. There's been a huge amount of consolidation in that sector. The ADM Bunge merger, there have been other mergers. They fly very much under the radar screen. because they tend to be monitored by the financial community, because it does deal with trading and risk management through financial tools. But it's very important, because if you want to engage if you want to engage services to protect price volatility, to insulate yourself against price volatility, you need good choices in terms of who you can potentially go to. But when there are only 3 risk management firms out there and trading firms, that's not a lot of choice. And the prices you'll pay will be high, and the quality of those products, those financial management products you get, will be low.